but you guys are also firmly planted in the traditional finance world. You're serving TD Ameritrade and other large offices. John, can you comment a little bit? What are some differences between crypto data and like this DeFi world and the traditional kind of world, whether that's a hedge fund or a family office or some of the larger funds?
Well, I think the answer to that is, in some cases everything is different, and in some cases nothing is different. Everything's the same, right? Conceptually, you're dealing primarily with time series data, so every minute the price ticks over. That concept, as far as it was this price for, let's say, BTC or Apple or whatever it is, certain price, certain volume traded at that price. That kind of information with a timestamp is common across all of those sorts of things. Elements of reference data. So we're looking at an instrument that, in, let's say, traditional financial markets, has a company that was the issuer of the instrument, the country of incorporation, the number of units that are created. Similar types of things you can also see on, let's say, any other crypto instrument aside from perhaps the issuer, because who issued Bitcoin? Well, there is no particular backing issuer, things of that nature. Other unique characteristics of, let's say, events that take place. So a corporate action, you might have a stock split, for example. There's very clearly defined rules around how you understand and define and handle that information. If you have a chain split in, let's say, the Bitcoin to Bitcoin Cash event, that's not at all the same thing, right? There's obviously similarities in concept. I have two parallel things where there was one thing before, but how you handle that, where you get that information, how do you recognize that this event is on its way? Those are pre-planned and much more organized, shall I say, in the traditional market sense, because the laws require that to be so. You know where you're going to go and you're going to acquire this information. You can predict it. There's a calendar of these sorts of things. In crypto, to a certain extent, good luck, right? Maybe it's on Telegram, maybe it's on Twitter, maybe there's some Discord, maybe there's a number of disparate sources, and then in some cases, there's maybe a private Slack group that some core developers of some platform know, and it's privileged information. It's hard to find out. So those somewhat more disjointed and slightly less formal arrangements can make this a lot more difficult to keep up with, but therein also lies the opportunity for those who have this information flow to potentially profit, which we've seen time and time again. There's been massive volatility in this industry, which I would say in traditional market data is much less frequent to see a 10 to 20% swing at any particular asset price over the course of a couple of hours, as we've seen probably several times this month already, let alone the general sort of crypto history in that respect. That aside, as Dimitri was mentioning, because of this much more sort of steeped history of rule sets, formality, and process, there's a lot of document trails and paperwork that there have been constrictions on what you can do with data, unless either commercially you're licensed to do so, you have otherwise explicit permission, or legally you just may not be allowed to distribute certain kinds of information certain ways, regardless of commercial implication, right? Some information is just not for, let's say, public consumption. Maybe there's instruments which are for sophisticated institutional investors only. Disclosure of certain kinds of information of that sort to the general public is not as easy to do, or is possibly restricted entirely from being done. But whether we're talking about traditional data or crypto data, ultimately it does come down to whoever the consumer is. They need to know that they're getting the right thing. They need to know what it is, where it's coming from. It suits their needs, and it's always going to be there when they need it. And whatever the technological or commercial cost of acquiring that data, but that also suits their use case, right? If they derive $10 of value from something, they're happy to pay more than $10 for it, right? The opposite is not going to be true. They won't pay, $20 for something that's worth $5 to them, that sort of thing. So commercially, how we can also make sure that we optimize all of these factors to receive, as a business, obviously some sort of value for ourselves from this is a balance that Chainlink has its own interesting perspective on how that also offers that from an ecosystem perspective versus how we might do that more bilaterally, shall I say, in a traditional sales environment.